step into the past with us, to an era when the wilderness reigned supreme and survival was an art form. Today, we're delving into the lives of the American frontier's most iconic figures, the mountain men. These weren't just characters from history books. They were the embodiment of self-reliance, resilience, and a profound connection to the environment. Their very existence hinged on their ability to understand the subtle signals of the wilderness, and this skill was nowhere more evident than in their crucial decision of where to build their cabins. Imagine yourself a solitary figure, hundreds of miles from civilization, with only your wits and your gear. The choice of a cabin site wasn't a whim. It was a strategic imperative, a calculated gamble against the unforgiving elements, hostile encounters, and the relentless demands of survival. They didn't have architects or real estate agents. They had their instincts, their experience, and an intimate knowledge of nature's every whisper. So how did they do it? What ancient wisdom guided their hands as they selected the very ground upon which they'd stake their lives? Let's delve deep into the lost art of mountain man cabin placement, uncovering the layers of foresight and practicality that shaped their homes in the wild. The paramount pillars: shelter, security, and sustainability. At its very core, every decision a mountain man made about his cabin site revolved around a critical triumvirate of needs: shelter, security, and sustainability. These weren't merely conveniences. They were absolute non-negotiable requirements for survival in an unforgiving landscape. To compromise on any one of these pillars was to invite hardship, danger, and often failure. First, let's delve into shelter. The American West, while breathtakingly beautiful, was also a land of meteorological extremes that could turn deadly in an instant. Imagine the brutal bite of a Rocky Mountain blizzard, burying landscapes under feet of snow, with temperatures plummeting far below freezing. Or consider the scorching, relentless sun of a summer desert, baking the earth and sapping strength. Then there were the sudden, violent thunderstorms that could unleash torrential rain, hail, and terrifying winds. A flimsy structure, poorly constructed, or more critically, poorly placed, simply wouldn't offer the necessary protection. The cabin had to be a bastion against these forces, a sanctuary where precious body heat could be retained, gear could be kept dry, and the weary body could truly recover from the day's arduous demands. It was a place to thaw frozen fingers, dry soaked clothing, and find respite from nature's relentless assault. Without adequate shelter, a mountain man's strength would wane, his health would falter, and his ability to hunt and trap would quickly diminish. Next, we address security. The wilderness, while a source of abundant resources, was also a domain of inherent dangers. This wasn't just about encounters with formidable predators like grizzly bears or wolves, though those were certainly real threats. It was also about the human element. The frontier was a wild tapestry of diverse groups, rival trappers fiercely protecting their trapping grounds, various indigenous tribes with whom relationships could range from friendly trade to outright conflict, and outlaws or desperate individuals seeking to prey on isolated figures. A cabin had to offer more than just walls. It needed to be a defensible position. This meant having clear lines of sight to detect approaching threats, the ability to conceal oneself or one's movements, and a structure stout enough to withstand potential attack. Often the best defense was not being found at all, making concealment as vital, if not more so, than overt fortification. A mountain man understood that his cabin was both his home and his last line of defense. Finally, we arrive at sustainability. A mountain man was entirely self-reliant, living off the bounty of the land. His cabin couldn't be a drain on his limited energy or the surrounding resources. It had to be strategically positioned to facilitate his survival and his livelihood. This meant immediate and consistent access to everything he needed: a reliable source of clean water for drinking and cooking, abundant game trails and trapping grounds for food and furs, and a readily available supply of timber for building, repairs, and most crucially, fuel for his life-saving fire. A site that required constant, arduous treks for basic necessities would quickly lead to exhaustion, inefficiency, and ultimately, failure. Every day was a calculation of energy expended versus resources gained. A sustainably chosen site minimized the former and maximized the latter, allowing the mountain man to thrive, or at least endure, in the challenging environment. These three pillars, shelter, security, and sustainability, formed the bedrock of every successful cabin choice. They weren't just criteria on a checklist. They were intertwined principles that dictated the very possibility of survival in the untamed American wilderness. A mountain man's life depended on understanding and mastering this fundamental relationship with the land. Topography. Reading the Earth's embrace. The very first and arguably most intuitive lesson a mountain man learned, often through hard-won experience, was how to read the land. Topography, the study of the arrangement of the natural and artificial physical features of an area, wasn't an academic discipline to them. It was a living, breathing language, a detailed map etched into the very surface of the earth. The subtle undulations, the gentle slopes, the sharp rises, and the hidden depressions all told a crucial story, a narrative of wind patterns, water flow, snow accumulation, and natural protection. Mastering this language was paramount to choosing a truly viable and survivable cabin site. Mountain men invariably sought out natural depressions, hollows, or most commonly, the leeward side of hills and ridges. To understand why, imagine a fierce winter wind, a true blizzard, whipping mercilessly through a valley. A cabin perched exposed on a prominent ridge or in an open, flat expanse would be relentlessly blasted by these gale-force winds. This exposure wouldn't just be uncomfortable, it would be catastrophically inefficient. Heat would be stripped from the cabin at an alarming rate, forcing the occupant to expend precious firewood and energy just to stay warm. Furthermore, the constant stress of the wind would weaken the cabin's structure over time, leading to potential damage and vulnerability. In stark contrast, a cabin nestled into the curve of a hillside, or tucked directly behind a natural rise or a sturdy ridge, would be remarkably shielded. The earth itself would act as a massive natural windbreak, deflecting the harshest currents up and over the dwelling. This wasn't merely about comfort, it was about the profound physics of thermal regulation. The land, embracing the cabin, would provide a significant insulating blanket. The ground temperature, even in winter, is often higher than the ambient air temperature, and burying or backing a cabin into a slope leverages this thermal mass to maintain warmth and drastically reduce heat loss. This clever placement minimized the amount of firewood needed, conserving a vital resource and reducing daily labor. Beyond wind protection, they possessed an almost intuitive, ingrained understanding of solar orientation. A gently sloping, south-facing site was consistently one of the most highly prized characteristics of any potential cabin location. The reasoning is elegantly simple. In the Northern Hemisphere, a south-facing exposure maximizes sunlight throughout the day, particularly during the shorter, darker, and colder days of winter. This natural passive solar heating would significantly contribute to keeping the cabin warmer without expending additional fuel. Sunlight penetrating the cabin during the day would warm the interior, and even subtle warming of the exterior logs would make a difference. More sun also meant less persistent snow accumulation directly around the immediate vicinity of the cabin, offering easier movement, reducing dampness, and melting ice more quickly. All subtle but critical advantages in a harsh environment. They harnessed the sun's power for warmth and light long before modern science articulated the principles of passive solar design. Furthermore, reading the topography meant understanding drainage patterns. A low-lying area, while offering some wind protection, might also be a natural basin for water accumulation during heavy rains or spring thaws. Mountain men were acutely aware of the dangers of dampness, flooding, and the health issues they could bring. Thus, they would typically choose sites on slightly elevated ground within a sheltered area, ensuring good natural drainage away from the cabin foundation. This foresight prevented saturated ground, structural rot, and perpetually damp conditions inside their living space. In essence, the mountain man's understanding of topography was a holistic comprehension of how the Earth's features interacted with the elements. It was an art of seeking the most favorable microclimate, a natural wisdom that allowed them to become one with the landscape, finding both sanctuary and strategic advantage within its embrace. Water, the irreplaceable artery of life. If topography was the skeleton, water was the very blood of the frontier. Without a reliable, accessible source of clean water, no cabin site, no matter how perfect in other respects, was viable. Mountain men prioritized sites near clean, flowing streams, consistent springs, or well-protected ponds. Stagnant water was a breeding ground for disease, something they couldn't afford. A spring, bubbling up from the earth, offered a constant supply of fresh, cold water, often untouched by surface contaminants. This was the gold standard. However, simply being near water wasn't enough. The site had to be elevated slightly above the water source. This was a crucial defense against flooding, particularly during the powerful spring thaws when swollen rivers and streams could engulf everything in their path. An elevated position also aided in sanitation, preventing runoff from the cabin or camp area from contaminating their primary water supply. The ease of access was also paramount. Hauling heavy buckets of water over long distances or treacherous terrain was a daily chore they sought to minimize. A cabin often stood a mere stone's throw from a pristine, babbling brook, its gentle murmur a constant reminder of life's essential rhythm. Resources, the bounty of the wild. A mountain man's existence was one of constant resource management. His cabin site had to be a nexus of vital supplies. Timber was the most immediate requirement, not just for constructing the cabin itself, but for repairs, extensions, and, most critically, as fuel for fire. Winters in the mountains were unforgiving, and a constant, abundant supply of firewood was non-negotiable. They sought out healthy, mature forests nearby, but not so dense that they blocked out too much light or became impossible to navigate. Ideally, the timber would be easily felled and transported. They knew the best types of wood for burning, for structural integrity, and for crafting tools. Beyond timber, the presence of game was a make-or-break factor. Deer, elk, buffalo, beaver, and a myriad of smaller animals were their sustenance and their livelihood. They would look for animal trails, natural watering holes, mineral licks, and areas known for seasonal migrations or preferred grazing grounds. A well-chosen site would place them squarely within easy hunting and trapping range, ensuring a consistent supply of food and the valuable furs that were their currency. They understood the seasonal movements of animals and often had multiple, smaller trapping shelters strategically placed throughout their territory. and while meat was the dietary staple, forage provided essential variety and nutrients. Mountain men understood the seasonal availability of wild berries, roots, nuts, and edible plants. A diverse flora around the cabin site could supplement their diet and provide crucial medicinal resources. They were botanists by necessity, knowing which plants were safe, which were useful, and which were dangerous. Defense and concealment. The art of disappearing. In the untamed American frontier, survival wasn't merely about resilience against nature. It was equally about constant vigilance against potential threats from both man and beast. For the mountain man, his cabin was not just a home, it was a potential target, a visible sign of his presence, and thus, a critical element in his defensive strategy. Consequently, defense and concealment were not luxuries or afterthoughts. They were vital, life-or-death considerations that profoundly influenced the choice of every cabin site. A mountain man's cabin was rarely, if ever, built in a prominent, exposed location. They intuitively understood the principle of invisibility through integration. Their goal was to make their dwelling as inconspicuous as possible, to blend it seamlessly into the surrounding landscape, effectively making it disappear to the casual observer. This meant seeking out natural cover, dense stands of mature trees, towering rock outcrops, deep ravines, or the subtle folds of terrain that provided both visual obstruction and tactical advantage. A cabin tucked into a thicket of pines or nestled against a massive granite boulder would be incredibly difficult to spot from a distance, deterring casual discovery by curious or hostile parties. This proactive concealment was often the first and most effective line of defense, preventing a confrontation altogether. Beyond mere visual concealment, mountain men were masters of strategic positioning for tactical advantage. They meticulously considered lines of sight, not just what they could see, but what could be seen of them. A good cabin site offered a clear, unimpeded view of approaching trails, waterways, or any likely avenue of access. This panoramic surveillance allowed them to spot potential threats long before they arrived at the cabin, giving them precious time to prepare. This preparation might involve grabbing their rifle, extinguishing their fire, moving to a better defensive position, or simply melting away into the surrounding wilderness. The element of surprise was a powerful weapon, and they sought to ensure it was always on their side. Furthermore, the physical structure and its immediate surroundings were often integrated into a defensive scheme. Sometimes a cabin would be built directly against a massive boulder, a sheer rock face, or a steep, unscalable bank. This provided a natural, impenetrable wall on one side, effectively reducing the number of vulnerable approaches the mountain man had to defend. It also conserved labor, as one wall was pre-built by nature. Entrances were often small, easily barricaded, and positioned to offer a narrow firing arc outwards. Windows, if present at all, were usually small, high, and designed more for observation than light, minimizing exposure. They also thought about how sound might travel. A cabin near a noisy stream, for instance, might offer acoustic concealment, masking the sounds of movement within the cabin or even the sound of an approaching individual. Conversely, a site that allowed the mountain man to hear approaching game or humans from a distance, without being heard himself, was invaluable. In essence, the mountain man's approach to defense and concealment was a highly evolved form of environmental intelligence. It was about leveraging every natural feature, the lay of the land, the density of the foliage, the presence of rock formations, to create a home that was both a sanctuary and a fortress. They didn't just build cabins. They crafted havens that whispered their presence only to those they chose to reveal it to, embodying the true art of disappearing into the vast, wild embrace of the frontier. Escape routes. The prudent path to survival. Even the most meticulously planned defense could fail. A truly astute mountain man always had a plan B, a clear and viable escape route. This foresight was a testament to their deep-seated understanding of risk and their unwavering commitment to self-preservation. Their cabin sites were frequently chosen with multiple avenues of retreat in mind. This might be a hidden, narrow trail leading directly into dense, impassable woods. A swift, downhill path to a river where a canoe or raft could be hidden. Or a strategic climb up a steep, difficult slope that would deter pursuit. They never wanted to be cornered, never wanted to be left with no options. This proactive thinking, this constant awareness of potential peril, was what often separated the survivors from those who succumbed to the harsh realities of the frontier. They moved with the land, ready to become one with it again at a moment's notice. So, the next time you envision a lone, rugged cabin nestled in the heart of the mountains, remember it's far more than just a collection of logs. It's a testament to incredible foresight, an enduring monument to human ingenuity in the face of raw nature. It's a masterclass in reading the environment, a perfect synergy of shelter, security, and sustainability. These silent sentinels of the past stand as powerful reminders of an era when connection to the land wasn't a choice, but the very essence of life itself. The mountain men didn't just build homes. They wove themselves into the very fabric of the wilderness, leaving behind a legacy of resilience and a profound understanding of what it truly means to master the land. What aspects of mountain man's survival do you find most fascinating? Share your thoughts and questions in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into frontier wisdom, please hit that like button, subscribe to Era of the Greats for more journeys into the wild, and make sure to ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and stay connected to the wild spirit within.